Passive synthesis is a concept introduced by Deleuze to explain the synthesis of time, indifference, and repetition. In Anti-Oedipus, Deleuze-Guattari divided this concept into three types: connection, disjunction, conjunction. And they expanded into a more active concept that explains the operation modality of the desiring machine. Connection, disjunction, and conjunction are concepts that express the three modes of the passive synthesis. These three concepts, which corresponded to different methods to make portmanteau words in the logic of science, now get to be combined with the passive synthesis. The concept of passive synthesis is not explicitly used in 1,000 Platos, but the concepts of connection and conjunction continue to be used in the changed way. And in this process, the meanings of the three concepts change, and accordingly, the status of each concept varies. Analysis is the separation of key factors from a mixture of things in order to find the distinctive cause of a result, whereas synthesis is about creating a new effect by combining what was separated from each other into one. For example, photosynthesis of plants is the process of combining sunlight and certain gas to produce carbohydrate. This is the synthesis that plants perform on a daily basis. On the other hand, determining which of the various gases near the plant is involved in photosynthesis is an analysis. Analysis corresponds to subtraction, which eliminates all the variables except the key ones that produce the result by comparing the actions of the variables, whereas synthesis corresponds to addition that adds even those that were thought to have no relation with each other to see changes newly formed. Analysis is the purification process that separates the effect of a particular variable by means of subtraction, whereas synthesis is the process of mixture that sees what is newly formed by mixing variables that don't seem related to each other. The former is the one that identifies the factors which produce the same results among various variables, whereas the latter is the one which puts the difference that makes difference into operation in that it pays attention to what are newly formed through combination. It was through Kant that the word synthesis emerged as an important concept in philosophy. It was Husserl that brought the word passive synthesis to the fore as a concept. He sees synthesis as an active action belonging to the nature of consciousness. Even when seeing or hearing what is over there, consciousness performs the synthesis of constituting the object by paying attention. He calls the action of paying attention on something in this way active synthesis. On the contrary to this, thorough passivity, like, for example, a dog barking heard a moment ago, is about something that occurred somewhere and entered my sensory organs which we didn't pay attention to or concentrate on. Therefore, for Husserl, passivity is an active concept in thorough contrast with the activity of consciousness rather than a positive concept. The concept of passive synthesis, which Husserl has pushed into the corner, is used by Deleuze for the operation of unconsciousness, which is the operation of numerous small egos, larval egos, that exist before consciousness or ego. For example, the synthesis of habit is the repetition occurring when a particular stimulus or movement is contradicted in heart, muscle, nerve, cell, etc., through the emotion of a fulfilling contemplation. The contemplation and contraction of these small egos are the base and foundation of active synthesis that occurs at the level of the whole organism. Now, we are well aware that these small egos, which he named larvae egos, have bacterial origins. It is not yet known whether it is a book or an apple just by what is formed through this habitual synthesis alone. In addition to this, the memories of what you saw in the past should be involved again, the micro-memories of color, shape, and smell, etc. The memory here is the small memories which the cell, muscle, nerve, or tongue remembers. The memory of a particular thing which a specific shape and smell are combined into. All of these are micro-memories before me. My memory is what the consciousness reproduces by recalling something memorized in the brain after all this synthesis is done. On the other hand, the three types of synthesis presented in the logic of science, which are connection, conjunction, and disjunction, are related to how to make portmanteau words. Connection is the abbreviation of one sentence or several words into a word. For example, NIMBY is the abbreviation of not in my backyard, and TMI is that of too much information. This is a common method for words used as buzzwords. Conjunction is about the case where words of heterogeneous series are abbreviated and integrated into an object with a particular new meaning. The new animal snark that Lewis Carroll made by abbreviating snake and shark is the case. It is disjunction that Deleuze puts more stress on, which is the disjunctive combination of different meanings. He takes the French word fumeux as an example, which is the abbreviation of frieux and fumant. In that, the abbreviated word has different meanings depending on which of those two words is weighted, and in the sense that it implies the meaning of both sides, this type of synthesis is called disjunction. The words made by this method simultaneously contain a meaning that can be diverged into very different meanings. In Anti-Oedipus, the concept of passive synthesis is redefined as the synthesis that consciousness is not involved, that is, the synthesis of a consciousness in the microscopic layer. There are three different moments in this synthesis. Those three are production, registration, and consumption, and connection, disjunction, and conjunction are the modes of synthesis that corresponds to each of them respectively. The synthesis of production is the synthesis through which the connection of one body and another, or one part of a body and another part is produced in a particular machine. For example, the synthesis of production, where the connection of the part called mouth and the called esophagus produces an eating machine that interrupts and draws off the flow of nutrients, is the case. Another example would be the case where a sexual machine called female and that called male are produced by the connection of two bodies. This is why the form of productive synthesis is called connection and corresponds to the word and. According to this book, there are two different modes of connection. One is the connection of body parts with molecular multiplicities, and the other is the connection of antibodies in the motor global determination of male or female. The synthesis of registration is about the registration of a particular determination that occurred through the synthesis of production on the body. For example, the body called mouth becomes an eating machine when connected to the esophagus, a speaking machine when connected to the vocal cords, and a sexual machine when connected to other mouth. In other words, different determinations can be registered in the body called mouth. This means that it can become a different machine depending on the mode of the productive connection. To put it another way, different determinations can be distributed to that body. This is called disjunction because it is a matter of deciding either or between different determinations. Of course, it can also be distributed in the form of either or. The former is an exclusive disjunction that allows to choose either one of the determinations, saying, is that a man or an wolf, about a certain body, whereas the latter is the inclusive disjunction open to the registration of different determinations, saying that is a man and also a wolf. Determination produced by the productive connection is registered on the body, and the integration of so registered partial bodies into one gives birth to a whole such as an organism or a human. As the mouth, esophagus, stomach, anus, hands, feet, etc. are integrated into an organism called I, it is called conjunction. So it is the word of conjunction that collects several parts and subsumes them under one result. In other words, I consumes parts of the body as a locomotive organ, digestive organ, and excretory organ through this conjunction. Lacan said that babies feel pleasure when they look at their images reflected in the mirror and discover that the partial objects are integrated to form the whole body of I. This also is one of the ways to consume an integrated whole. That is why conjunction is called the synthesis of consumption. There also are two different kinds of conjunctions here. One is the organic-bionivocal conjunction that allocates identity or difference through the correspondence between the halibut scale and my lung, the cause for foot and my foreleg in the whole organism. The other is the nominative polyvocal conjunction that distributes even my hands to different determinations that stray from organisms such as walking machine, cursing machine, and stick machine. The meaning and status of these three concepts of passive synthesis, which have the central positions in analyzing the production of desire in Anti-Oedipus, vary greatly in 1,000 plateaus. First, the concept of disjunction, which had the most important and positive status in the logic of science, disappears. The concept of disjunction appears only once in 1,000 plateaus in a sentence that emphasizes the importance of the concept of connection. Everything was on the lines, between the lines, in the end, that made one and the other imperceptible, without disjunction or conjunction, but only a line of flight forever in the process of being drawn toward a new acceptance, the opposite of renunciation or resignation. Second, contrary to this, the concept of connection becomes a central concept frequently used throughout 1,000 plateaus and occupies the ideal status that forms assemblage and constitutes multiplicities. For example, it is exactly connection that is mentioned first of all when explaining the characteristics of rhizome. First and second, principles of connection and heterogeneity. Any point of a rhizome can be connected to anything other and must be. These two changes need to be elaborated a bit because some argues that disjunction is the principle of the philosophy of difference. In the logic of science, disjunction is definitely given the most important position among the three methods of synthesis. That the univocity of being is paired with it demonstrates this well. Saying philosophy merges with ontology, ontology merges with the univocity of being. Deleuze goes so far as to say the univocity of being merges with the positive use of the disjunctive synthesis, which is the highest of formation. To put it simply, this means that being can have all of the different determinations as self-expressing words. Whether it's this or that, everything can be the expression of being. On the other hand, as connection is defined as the abbreviation of words or sentences that form a series in the book, it is homogeneous even compared to conjunction. However, in Anti-Oedipus, connection is merely defined as a combination of heterogeneous terms. Thereby, connection gets to have for the first time the meaning that matches the word connection. This is because it becomes clear at this time that it is through connection that something becomes which machine, and it becomes a different machine if the connecting neighbor is different. In this case, connection can be denoted with the sign of plus that the word and literally means. On the other hand, if connection is the abbreviation of the words or sentences of a series, like in the logic of science, there is no meaning of the heterogeneous. Because it is the way of abbreviation that words get out from a given series, it should be marked as minus, not as plus. Therefore, it can be said that this concept of connection is still far from the philosophy of difference. It is for this reason that connection has only a secondary and negative position in this book. In Anti-Oedipus, connection is redefined as plus, and connection, disjunction, and conjunction now have coordinate statuses as the forms of passive synthesis corresponding to production, registration, and consumption. As mentioned above, there are exclusive one and inclusive one for disjunction, molecular partial one and motor global one for connection, and also organic one and pneumatic one for conjunction. All three syntheses commonly have both positive one and negative one. However, the concept of disjunction, which was the most important in the logic of science, disappears in 1,000 plateaus, and instead, connection emerges as the general and most positive concept. It comes to have the status corresponding to the difference as what makes the determination of a term by the neighbor relation, and makes the determination different as the neighbor it meets becomes different, namely the status of the difference that makes. When Deleuze-Guattari suggests the concept of rhizome in contrast with the transcendence thinking that postulates the one-dimensioned connection as its first characteristic, the number of dimensions increases as the number of connections increases. The plane of consistency can be reached through this. Therefore, from the standpoint of 1,000 plateaus, If there is such a thing as the idea of synthesis in the philosophy of difference, it is more appropriate to say it is connection, not disjunction. Third, the meaning and status of the concept of conjunction also change. In A Thousand Pleiades, Deleuze Guattari used the concept of conjunction to refer to the totalization in the mode of organic or arborescent mode, but what is as important as that is the concept of the conjunction of flow. The conjunction of flow is associated with the abstract machine, which leads to the positive plane of consistency. Beneath the forms and substances of the strata, the plane of consistency constructs continuums of intensity. It creates continuity for intensities that it extracts from distinct forms and substances. Beneath relative movements, the plane of consistency performs conjunctions of flows of the territorialization. In this case, the conjunction of flow has a positive meaning. But that's not all. The conjunction of flow is also divided into two again. It is in relation with the coded and the territorialized flow that the concept of the conjunction of flow is analytically used the most. First of all, the qualified and topical conjunction that consolidates the decoded flow of wealth between different nations or empires is the case. Another case would be the abstract and generalized conjunction of the flow of wealth and that of labor, which leads to the birth of capitalism. However, even this abstract conjunction is nothing more than a conjunction causing blockages, unlike creative connections, unless it's traced from the abstract machine of axiomatic system, and is in contrast with the ability to draw a plane of consistency with an increasing number of connections. Even the abstract and generalized conjunction is not just positive. In summary, the concept of passive synthesis continues to appear in Deleuze's thoughts from difference and repetition to A Thousand Pleiades. In the early days, the concept of disjunctive among the three syntheses had the central status, but in the later years, the concept of connection changes to be the central one. In this process, the meanings of three concepts continue to change, and the concept of connection precisely gets to accord with the concept of difference created through meeting, the concept of difference that makes. That this concept leads to the ability to draw a plane of consistency indicates the maximum of the positivity of this concept.